Salutations, respected viewers. I am George from Ireland, and this video is about Donald J. Trump and how he should not declare a state of emergency, and in fact Trump is the emergency. It's his mind that troubles me and should worry everybody else too. He's a walking disaster zone. So he failed to get the funding for his border barrier. He's not even calling it a wall most of the time these days. In December, he was offered some money for enhanced border security patrols, turned that down. I won't relate the whole tale, but we know the shutdown, 35 days, ended. And now, you know, the US facing another shutdown, probably be averted, but because the Democrats, they offered him 50 miles of border fence. But and he's been humming and hawing, will he take it, will he not take it? Of course, you never know where you are with him because he's just so fickle. And of course, there are at least 200 miles that need to be built to close all the gaps. So I notice how he's full of all this cant about the danger of crime. Now, of course, crime is bad, and it would be better if it was prevented altogether. It's never going to be prevented entirely. One could at least lower the incidence of crime. But it really was nauseating to see him rail about the evils of violent crime when he himself incites violent crime at his rallies. Remember 2016 when saying, seriously, beat the shit out of him, guys. I'll pay the legal fees. People should be carried out on stretchers. And people were beaten up at his rallies, and he persisted in inciting violent assaults on people, and these crimes continued to be committed. I don't know why on earth he's not been prosecuted. There's this fairy tale that there's equality before the law in the United States, and I'm not saying that's the only country that's false, but you see what he can get away with, flagrantly on camera inciting crime, and nobody does anything about it. It's like his own Fifth Avenue principle. As he bragged on television, he could shoot somebody dead in broad daylight in the middle of Fifth Avenue, and his collar would never be felt. He's a modern-day Nero, but perhaps that's unfair to Barbus, since he could at least play a musical instrument. Anyway, Trump would not want illegal immigrants coming to the United States to commit sexual assault because that's his job, and we're putting another American out of his job. So he is extraordinarily graceless and disloyal to his subordinates. But what a glory boy he is if things are ever going right. And I'm an even-handed person, and so that's why I go out of my way to find something positive to say about even his unexampled chaos of a government. That the stock market rose quite a lot. All right, it fell a bit about a couple of months ago, but it's recovered somewhat. Unemployment is very low, particularly amongst African-American people and so on. So even in the case of someone as dreadful, moronic, and grossly incompetent as Trump, there has been some positive news. He always demands to be lionized, but he'll never take responsibility when things go wrong, which of course is the true test of leadership and indeed maturity. So this man has a plethora of faults, and I'll limb just a few of them here. I'll think about his outright deceitfulness. Is remember the health checkup, this annual health checkup, and he released a statement about that recently, but it contained no particulars whatsoever. Remember his hyperbole about his health before the election, getting his doctor to sign just a flagrantly ridiculous statement saying he will be the healthiest individual ever to be elected to the presidency, ever of all the presidents who served before. Of all the 44 presidents who served before, what? So Trump at 40 was going to be healthier, sorry, at 70 was going to be healthier than JFK at 43. And I know JFK had his health issues, or healthier at Obama's in his 40s. Look how slim he was, played basketball all the time. And other presidential candidates, they released pages and pages of verbatim medical records. Anyway, look at George W. Bush, and he was proven to be the top 1% of men his age for health, exercising like crazy. Even Bush Sr. was at least quite slim, and Jimmy Carter went jogging and things like that. So Trump may well be about to declare a state of emergency. What the Democrats should say is, if you do that, any of us is elected, the several candidates who've declared they want the Democratic nomination, if any of us is elected president, we will instantly declare a national state of emergency on gun violence and or health care. And obviously some Republicans have deep misgivings about what Trump is trying to do. They're already publicly criticizing him, trying to talk him out of it. He's sometimes open to persuasion. So wiser counsels just occasionally prevail, well, particularly if it's on Fox News, because that's the real authority in this White House. Because it sets a very bad precedent, as Republicans would see it. Isn't it funny how when Puerto Rico was devastated a few months ago and thousands of people were killed, no state of emergency then, Trump didn't give a fig? Well, I suppose because they don't get to vote for the presidency, they're a territorial state. Or when New Orleans was wrecked by that hurricane way back in 2005, no state of emergency then. So Trump, the supposed deal maker, he couldn't strike what he found to be a palatable deal with Congress. And they offered him quite a lot, quite a reasonable deal. In fact, I thought they'd gone quite a bit too far. I thought offer him 10 miles something so that he'll turn it down. But it can't be so derisory like 1 mile that he seems to be right to turn it down, right from his perspective and right from those of his supporters, because, you know, it'd be great if you could split some of the Trumpsters saying, well, 50 miles is quite a lot, we should take it. And I'm saying, no, we won't accept it unless it's every single inch. There's this deal maker. Remember this North Korean deal, which has not been implemented at all, and it's got no deadline, no timeline, no mechanism by which compliance would be monitored. And he and Kim Jong-un, they're not just frères ennemis, they are political lovers, as Trump said it. How nauseating is that? It's part of this wider malaise whereby he adulates these foul, savage tyrants, and he admires them fulsomely, and his party's not troubled by that. Yet, of course, he will tear into the leaders of free countries who've been American allies for centuries, in some cases. And isn't it funny how he's got the support of so many Christian fundamentalists, yet he himself is such an outspoken admirer of these leaders who viciously persecute Christians, such as in North Korea, such as in Saudi Arabia, where no Christian worship is allowed, converting to Christianity is punishable by death, you're not allowed to have the Bible, you're not allowed to have Christmas trees, and on and on. I know, I used to live there. Other things, you know, obviously not managed to negotiate on the wall. This whole idea that he's good at making deals is a complete fiction, like his book, The Art of the Deal. I mean, is it Tony Schwartz, the bloke who actually wrote it, who listened to his phone calls, and it's gone public how Trump was a serial liar even then? Even if it could be proven 100% that it was a false statement, he would still make it. I don't know how on earth anyone in New York trusted him, did business with him. Like on Iran, there actually was an agreement which Trump has ripped up, left the Iranians at the moral high ground, not trying to make a new deal with them. You know, on Israel, he gave them so much, sending the US embassy to Jerusalem, something they wanted for decades, and getting absolutely nothing in return. No wonder the Zionist lobby is very keen to keep him there. He's a gift. He's given them everything they wanted. He may well attack Iran on their behalf. So Trump is not saving the United States from catastrophe. He is creating catastrophes. You see this perversion of the democratic process whereby he would invoke a state of emergency where patently no emergency exists, and it's the lowest level of border crossings, illegal border crossings, since 1971. And taking American jobs, funny that, because unemployment, as he says himself, is at an all-time low. So if anything, they must be stimulating the economy, right? As the economy is still growing, as the stock market's doing so well. Shouldn't you want more illegals, not fewer? Anyway, so autocratic tendencies on Trump's behalf, and he's moved inexorably towards authoritarianism, I suppose, his whole life. And when he was much younger, was rather calmer, more willing to compromise, had a degree of self-control. They say that to be in command of others, one must first of all be in command of oneself. Well, clearly he's not, but yet he has his fervent fans. These supporters of his, somehow they're able to turn Nelson's eye to all his manifold shortcomings. So he clearly has no principles at all, which is why this supposed ardent Christian, as I say, is someone who adores those who are so cruel to Christians. And he's been elevated to iconic status by the credulous, so we're wearing his image everywhere and chanting his name. So he has to give him a wall. If there is no wall, I don't think anything else can expiate that. Some of his supporters will never forgive him if he lets them down on that promise, which has been so often asserted by him. But you know that he's quietly dropped bits of it. We don't hear that part about Mexico going to pay for it. So it's unfathomable to me that people would trust him, a man who, on the record, has told them thousands upon thousands of provable falsehoods. He's shameless. And I notice he's never remorseful. Bill Clinton said sorry, came across as quite sincere to me. Other presidents have been remorseful for things that have gone wrong. George W. Bush for saying, bring it on, whatever. And Christians are supposed to be penitent. And that's the thing is, other Republican politicians that are caught having an extramarital affair or something like that, they can say, hey, I prayed about it, I'm turned over a new leaf, I held my hand up, I did wrong, and now I've tried to get over my sins. But Trump, no, not him at all. He doesn't perceive himself as being a sinner, despite being so iniquitous. I'm not a religious person at all, but if I were to be one, yeah, I'd say, yeah, I certainly am a sinner, and a fairly bad one too. So long ago, he seemed to be a gadfly, a New York character, they said, a colourful crank almost, well, with his off-the-wall ideas about Obama not being born in the United States. But obviously there was something more sinister behind that. It was a flagrant appeal to xenophobia. Now he's just cranky, increasingly cantankerous, and that's why he's always flying off the handle. And despite having $10 billion, as he said himself, he was never a philanthropist. Obviously donated to politicians, the Clintons, but he wanted something back. He's more of a misanthrope these days, snarling all the time, so full of bile and spite. But that's impressive to some people. They think that comes across as toughness. He's very confrontational, like over the wall, but then he caves in, or about family separation and childhood detentions, and of course then he capitulated on that one. So he seems to be mainly guided by his gurus, Ann Coulter and Sean Hannity. I remember when obviously he gave in, Trump gave in on the first government shutdown, Sean Hannity and Judge Pirro said that a defeat was not a defeat. So a glorious retreat, is that what it was? I mean, it's preposterous. So you see how they are. So completely mendacious. And obviously that undermines the credibility of everything else they say. So Trump is damnable, partly for his loathsome dishonesty. Now, I know he's not the first president to lie. Everybody lies, including yours truly. Particularly politicians lie. It's a question of frequency and scale. A lie that's close to the truth? No, these are absolute gigantic lies, day after day, and doesn't feel one bit embarrassed, just barefaced. And I suppose it goes back to what Nietzsche said, that people believe in what is seen to be strongly believed in. So he'll deliver these lies with confidence. He might actually believe some of them himself, which is perhaps more worrying, the way he's lost any grip on reality and can't distinguish what he believes to be true and what is actually true. So mendacity appears to be the core of his strategy, and it has worked astonishingly well. I am just staggered by how many people still support him. Around 40%. You think it might be 4%. And I pointed out the few bits of rosy news for the Trump administration, but that's it. Try as I might, I can't find other good reasons to like him. So there he is, commander-in-chief, surely unfit for command. What a role model for a young person, in the military or whatever. I mean, physically, obviously, so obese. Nothing wrong with that. Look at me, okay? But I don't claim to be a commander-in-chief or someone who's so indisciplined himself, who's so emotionally incontinent, always so self-referential, who's hyper-aggressive, who's got no self-restraint, utterly undignified. Anyway, he always hits below the belt. He's completely dishonorable, mentally unbalanced. He's fanatical when it comes to himself, but not about any ideals. That it's all about his name being written high, and that his achievements and so on always has to turn it back into himself. And again, some people think that's leadership. It's staggering, as I say. I really just can't get over it. It's difficult to conceive how people can be so base, so moronic as to admire Trump. So he's got a completely dysfunctional White House because of this. And of course, he doesn't recognize his many debilities. He's, of course, a monumental hypocrite, going on about the Bible whilst obviously having all these extramarital affairs. I don't object to people having extramarital affairs at all, by the way, but I do think it sticks in the craw to then be a creeping Jesus at the same time, or to say that, oh, we mustn't have foreigners coming stealing our jobs, when he exported jobs, when he brought in foreigners to do jobs, be his wife, twice actually, illegal immigrants working for him, and on and on and on, using religion as a cloak for adultery and so on. So I noticed the very stark contrast between these lofty ideals of the brotherhood of man, compassion, charity, grace, peace, liberality, and then Trump's, those are the Christian ideals, and then Trump's low and brutal character, his xenophobia, which is a staple of all his orations, the way he's just so spiteful in tone. He's always preaching odium towards various out-groups, his mercilessness, his mean-spiritedness, as in not even paying his workers, his belligerence, his biting hostility towards reasonable questions from journalists. He's so revengeful, he never forgets a slight, take decades to take it out on you. And he's so rapacious, constantly raking in the cash and then boasting about his avarice. You see, there's a gulf between that and the example of Jesus Christ he's supposed to base himself on. And even though I'm not a Christian believer, I think the preachment of Christ are quite admirable. And his life was well, quite praiseworthy. So Trump said he doesn't embrace the illegals as brothers in Christ, who and almost all of them are Christians. So Trump is an increasingly ludicrous figure, deranged, an egomaniac, just so ill-tempered, impatient about things. That's why, won't read documents and really knows nothing, just never does his homework, not briefed for anything, won't rehearse. That's why he balls us up public ceremonies. He's so intemperate, and he always shoots from the lip, reacts, opines, emotes, rather than coolly and rationally analyzes the situation like someone like Obama would do that. I mean, Obama, who was professorial, the difference could hardly be greater. Trump's so erratic, changes his mind so often. He's volatile, capricious, utterly unreliable. Even Trump can't rely on Trump. And, he will lead his party to calamity, I hope. But that's the thing. You never know what he's going to do next. So Trump is abominable with his grossly inflated sense of his own abilities and no notion of his own debilities and shortcomings. And again, that is what being an adult is, recognizing you can't be good at everything. You're bad at some things, and you have to fess up to that. Recognize your limitations. So he claims to be a staunch patriot, but look how badly he treats so many of his fellow Americans. Anyway, I haven't done a video about Trump for so long. I think he is going to do a state of emergency, declare that. Will it get through the courts? I think I'm going to pass on that one because I know so little about American law that conjecture on my part would be rash. I really hope it fails, but there we are.